Josh, welcome to Adulting with Autism.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, for all my listeners out there that's new to you, who are you? What do you do?
All right. Hi. So I'm Josh Davis, and I teach something called NLP, Neurolinguistic Programming, which is I'll tell you more about that here. And it's something that I have recently, in the last year or so, really been working to bring to parents, in particular fathers. I'm a dad, and it's an incredible set of tools for how we can change ourselves and help other people change quickly and in lasting ways. And I'll say more about what's unique about it and where it comes from. But my background, I have taught high school and college and grown-ups, and I have done a doctorate, a PhD, where I studied psychology and neuroscience. I was a professor at Barnard College, which is part of Columbia University, for a while. And then I've been in this space of writing books and teaching people about principles from neuroscience and psychology that we can use since then. So so that's who I am, and I'm really hoping to talk about what is here potentially for those of us who are trying to be adults and parents.
Ah, so I know a lot of my listeners out there are tired of advice and self help that doesn't stick. What do you want them to hear right away about how you approach change differently?
Okay. It's funny, I thought you were gonna say they're just tired of advice and self-help in general, and then you said that doesn't stick, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Either one would have been fine. But, uh, what's different here is, uh, what I am trying to bring to people, it comes from a world which is often new to them, and it's not stuff that I've kind of invented. This is stuff that's been 50 years or more in the making. This is developed by a number of different, people who are doing change work all day long, every day. And then what I'm doing is trying to teach it well. So what it is, the reason it's so different, and the reason that it's so useful, both come from the same thing, from where it's from. So it's called neuro linguistic programming, or NLP. Some people will have heard of that. If you haven't, the name is just confusing, and so let's not worry about the name and and just say NLP. But what it comes from actually is the world of psychotherapy. And we're not doing therapy. I'm not saying you have to be a therapist. But one thing I think a lot of people do know is that therapists spend all day, every day doing change work, and they have worked on every kind of change imaginable. And they wouldn't be in business if it didn't work sometimes, right? you know, so so what you have though, if you go back 50 years, just a little bit of history, a couple of minutes on this, I think helps really make the point. If you go back 50 years, 1970s, and this was starting in the 60s as well, actually, but there were a bunch of new psychotherapies that were happening. Cognitive therapy, gestalt therapy, family therapy, hypnotherapy, all these new outcome oriented therapies that are very different from let's just talk about it and try to figure out, understand your history and understand why you are how you are. But these were thinking about, given where you are now, what can you change about how you think or how you behave or how you react to triggers and so forth that's going to really help you live differently, right? And these outcome oriented therapies were having great results much more quickly than in previous forms. And it took the whole world of therapy by storm these days. If that's what everybody does. And now there's 50 years of research and it's all supported and so forth. What was special about NLP is at the time, it was very hard to try to figure out, like, how do we learn this stuff? It wasn't codified yet. It wasn't researched yet. I know this because actually my parents were family therapists. And so my mom at the time, she wanted to know, what is this pioneer, Dr. Milton Erickson, who was like developing all these new forms of what's called hypnotherapy. What is he doing? How do I learn that? And the only way to do it was to go and just fly to Arizona and try to watch him work. I mean, it wasn't, you couldn't do that really. And then these two guys, one was a linguistics professor and the other was a partner of his. They're looking at the language patterns that he and other very effective psychotherapists were using. Fritz Perls, other people who's, if you're in that field, these are just the names of giants in the field. They're looking at the language patterns, and using these tools from linguistics, they're able to separate the signal from the noise. What are the patterns that they're using again and again that help people consider an idea or break through limiting belief, right? What are the patterns that they're picking up on that help them understand where somebody's stuck or, how they might be able to make a change? And they just did a wonderful job of identifying. So you have these tools, they've made them kind of user friendly for someone who's deeply into that field, you know, to use. So if you're a therapist at the time, and so my mom went and studied it, many others did. You've probably heard of Tony Robbins. He went and studied it,
Yeah.
and that's what he uses is NLP. And he says that. He says it's the most powerful stuff he's ever come across. And so here we are 50 years on. Now I've been interested in this and studying it and teaching it now, some combination of those things for the last 26 years. In the last 2 or 3 years, I and my co-author, we recognize this stuff is not accessible for people who are not deeply involved in it. It's complex. There's a lot to it. So we spent a lot of time and thought figuring out how do you teach it in a simple way so anyone with no background can just get it and start using it. That's what the book is about. It's a USA Today bestseller, which suggests that, we succeeded at making it accessible at least, right? And we tried to just make it very simple tools. Now, since that time, because I'm a dad of 3, I'm looking at this and I'm like, these are incredible tools for helping to raise my kids or helping me and my wife to get on the same page or helping me to stop beating myself up and just be more effective as a dad and to be more present. Like all of these things I want to do. So I realized there's nothing for dads out there. This is incredible stuff. Let me use this stuff that I'm so steeped in and start teaching it for dads. And that's how I ended up here looking at this whole world of kind of how can we be these better parents and adults that we're trying to be. So that's where it comes from, what it is, why it's useful, and let me know if I've left out any critical pieces that help explain kind of what's the potential here.
Absolutely not. That was more clear than I've ever heard it. From like your perspective, why does the brain cling to old habits even when we want something different?
Uh-huh. So one of the core reasons is that we want something and you can want it badly. You can want it your whole life. But that's how strongly you want it, which is different from how kind of you might say congruently you want it. Does all of you want it? So a part of me really wants, let's say, to I guess move to I've always wanted to live near the beach, let's say, just to pick something, right? I've always wanted to live near the beach. This is part of me that just craves that. This is why don't I do that? It's my life. You only live once, right? I really want it. But then there's this other part of me that is resisting it because, like, well, look, if I do that, I mean, first of all, I'll feel irresponsible. That's one of the biggest things. How will I feel about myself? I shouldn't do that. What would other people think about my life choices? Right? That's very strong things internally. Or it'll actually cost a lot. There's some like practical things too. Or this is, when I do that, and I'm actually just not going to get together with my mom and my sister nearly as often because the traffic from even if it's a nearby beach, right? So all of these things are there. So I have this internal conflict. And when we have that internal conflict, typically we just stop there. Like we don't go past that thought. Oh, I can't do that. Or I shouldn't do that. That's where we stop. There's a mental wall. I shouldn't do that. It's as though there's a wall and we just haven't looked beyond the wall. And one of the things you can learn to do is to recognize these mental walls that come up because we have this internal conflict and discover, all right, let's play out that thought process. What would happen if I did do that? And we tend to realize, well, life would go on. I would figure things out. It's not this disaster that we shut it off. I can't even let myself think about that when we have this internal conflict. But the truth is, that's one of the best things we can do then and say, well, what would actually happen if? And you still might choose not to do it, but you're doing it with clear thinking. And the only way you're actually going to do that, move to that beach, is when you find a way that it actually serves all of your needs more congruently. If why do I want to be near my sister and my parents? Well, because, we have these wonderful moments together. Oh, wait a second. At the beach, we might have more wonderful moments because they're going to want to come out there, right? If I can get them to be in sync, that's when I make the move. But if I've got this internal struggle, it doesn't matter how much I want it. Doesn't matter if I've wanted it my whole life.
Well, that sucks because I'm like, well, that's a piece that you have to work on.
Well, you do. You if well, have to. What would happen if you didn't? You know, it's like I don't have to do these things, right? I either want and when I'm working with someone, I don't presume they need to accomplish a goal, but I do want to unpack it and help them see what their thinking really is so that they can then decide, do I want to just come to peace with this or do I want to find a new way to get there? But if you don't do that, you're just not going anywhere.
So you often say, like, manage attention, not time.
Mhm.
So, what does that look like for a brain that deals with like distractibility or executive functioning
Mhm.
challenges?
Yeah, I think that it becomes even more important, when that's the case. So, for anyone, it's in the world we live in, we have too much on our plates. There's simply too much to do. No one can actually do it. There is no such thing as catching up on your to-do list. So, let's try to set that aside as a goal. And I know even that can be a shocker for a lot of people, like, "Wait a second, but I've been chasing after it." That isn't going to happen. I think that's an important starting point, is that however, that's not a bad thing. That is a freeing thing, and it doesn't mean we give up on the list. What it does mean is that you have to have some tools for prioritizing. So, these tools are not always exactly what people might think. It's not just making a list and saying, "Okay, well, how do I do this? How do I do that?" That's getting into the weeds of execution. Prioritizing is recognizing that because I can't do everything, I need to find a way, and there are ways of doing this, of figuring out what's the stuff that's gonna really be meaningful for me, where if I accomplish that, you can think about your day right now, for example. If I d by the end of this day, if I've done this thing, I can say like, "Wow, you know what? That was the thing that I'm so happy I made progress on that." And if you didn't do it again, you're like, "I can't believe I didn't do that again." So, the thing is if we have more than 3 things that we're evaluating ourselves on that way, we're not prioritizing. You just can't hold that many things in mind. You might do other things, but what you're gonna focus on so you can learn to choose what you're gonna evaluate yourself on. And that actually enables you to do something else, which is once I know, okay, wait a second, finding new ways to reach dads for me, right? That's a big picture marketing goal, right? I can't just do that in a day. Fine. But if another day has gone by and I didn't even touch it because I was sort of afraid, or how do I break it down and what are the steps? And right. So I'm like, okay, this is a very important thing for me. So, all right. So I know it's on that list. So then here's the thing that I think a lot of people, this is often intuitive once you hear it, but new, because it just isn't how we've been operating. You've had the experience, am I right? Let me know that there's some days when you are just like you're nailing it. You can do anything. You got like this, like I can't believe how much stuff I did, and it was incredible, and the work was. And then you can have like a week, 2 weeks where it's just like you're worthless, right? You can't seem to do anything. Okay, that's called being human. It's not just you; it's everyone. Now, some people find that harder than others for sure, right? And um, one of the things that makes a huge difference is that there's a state that you're in. There's like this mental emotional state where you really are capable of more. In the mornings, even most people are capable of more than they are in the afternoon. There's research showing that this is just typical. Judges make worse decisions in the afternoon. I mean, it's been shown, and surgeons do. It's like these are just kind of fact. Now, it doesn't mean you won't get a good result from a judge or a surgeon, but you know, objectively, on average, you see that these things actually kind of decline. People, we're just not the same. We're not capable of the same stuff. You experience it as different. It is different. It really is different. So when you take that seriously and you know, okay, here's the stuff I'm going to evaluate myself on today, then you can focus. How do I set myself up to just be on for that thing? And I'm not going to worry about, I'm not going to try to be on for everything. I'm not going to try to do everything because this matters and I'm going to show up for that. Even if all I do is show up for 1 hour today. You move out 5 years, you keep showing up and being in that right state for that one thing, you did end up doing the stuff that matters. And it's not about how do I get myself to sit still all day long. That doesn't do it. We don't you actually that gets in the way of being in a good state for work. So it's a shift in how you think about how you show up, what's important and how am I gonna show up for it. And one simple if you're not sure how to get yourself into that state, one thing that just is like it's like flipping a switch. It works for just it's as far as I know, it works for everyone, is a little bit of cardio exercise.
You just killed my entire audience because they're like, "Oh, exercise. Let me fall out the chair."
No, well, you don't have to do that. It's not the only way. But I'm just saying, like, you can get into it just by, like, saying, "This is the important stuff. I'm not gonna get distracted on email or Instagram for an hour before I start work. I'm gonna let myself actually," because that burns your that wears you out. You don't People don't realize, but it wears out your mental it causes mental fatigue. You're making all these little decisions and dealing with all these little emotions when you're checking email and looking at Instagram. So if you've got an important task, don't do that stuff for the 15 minutes right beforehand. And it's as simple as that. You'll be in a better state. You'll do a much better job. But when I'm saying an exercise, I don't mean you have to like, okay, I need to go to the gym and like look great and all that. That This is not about health. This is about reducing your anxiety and being able to focus more clearly for the next like 6 to 8 hours. And I'm talking like 15-20 minutes of just getting to the point if you're someone who doesn't like to shower in the middle of the day or it's too difficult at work, getting to the point where you're like you can feel a little bit of sweat it's coming, but you're not sweating enough that you would have to shower, that'll do it. That's enough to get this effect. It's like a strategic way to just like switch on a really focused, great state.
Now, you've written another book called 2 Awesome Hours
Right.
that showed, like, how protecting a few blocks of attention can transform productivity. How can those ideas, like, translate for people who are burned out or who can't live, like, a perfect schedule?
Yeah. So the kind of general idea I was just talking about is very much from that work, that 2 awesome hours work. So big picture, the idea is this is about working less actually. And that's a scary thought for a lot of people. But if you think about people who make it up the ladder and they keep on taking on more and more responsibility, they're not adding another full workload each time they do that. They're making and you've everyone does this as you get better at things, become more expert. You don't just add like a whole additional day's worth of work every day. You choose things to do and you prioritize what needs to be done, what has to be done by me, and what am I gonna right? So we're all already doing this to some degree. This is about being more intentional about it and having this attitude about the day. I'm not going to try to be on all day long and be perfect and cram as much as I can in. I'm going to be really thoughtful about what do I want to be my 2 awesome hours today. Because everyone's capable of having a couple of hours where you're really nailing it and you're in the right state any given day. I mean, even if you're feeling sick, like you can often just really get it together and show up for a little time, right? But maybe you take a day off, whatever. But for the most part, that's a reasonable and achievable goal, and when you're really focused, this is the stuff that matters, and I wanna show up for that stuff, you can do some pretty extraordinary things when that's your focus. And I'm gonna cut myself some slack for the rest of the day. I might still work, but I'm not saying that has to be the perfect work, and that's the most important. Maybe that's when I'm getting to my email. Maybe that's when I'm getting to the other stuff. So for people who are, uh, struggling especially with, prioritizing or attention. Um, I think it's cruel to demand of yourself that you just try to do the things that some other people who have an easy time with focus can get away with. It's still not the best way for them to work, but they can get away with just sitting there and plodding away at it. But, take this as a gift. I can't, therefore, I have to work in this better way, which also leads to better life fulfillment, right? Because you actually get to the stuff that matters. So, if it's possible to reframe it that way, so it starts with what are my 3 things that really matter that I'm going to evaluate myself on. And once you know that, then how am I going to set up 2 awesome hours for that? And there's a bunch of strategies in the book based on like how the brain works and so forth, but that's the general concept. is that. It's some things to not do so you don't wear yourself out, and there's some things to do so that you can really show up.
Now, you specialized your programs and content for dads. So, why did you decide to focus on dads specifically?
So I'm a dad. I got 3 kids, 10, 7, and 3, and, I mess up all the time, right? But because I know about these tools, I'm always experimenting, and I'll have these wonderful moments. Like the other day, I was at home, and, by myself, and the kids were all playing in the backyard, and I just came in. I'm trying to make dinner. They're outside. My wife was still at the office, and, uh, all of a sudden things blow up. They're screaming at each other, right? But I know about this tool called pacing and leading that comes from this world of NLP. Um, and the idea is that you don't go in and try to tell somebody, calm down, you have to do this. You don't try to lead them somewhere else first. That's later. First, you just focus on going at their pace, joining them, being where they are. And what this does is it acknowledges that you respect their reality. It's a way of showing them non-verbally and verbally, I really hear you. This is real for you, what's going on. And so they're getting really upset with each other. And, you know, and I can't go do what I need to do. And so I'm outside and I walk out there and this is going on in front of me for a little bit. And I'm so tempted to just say, like, if you're wrong for this reason and you're wrong for that reason and blah, 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 right? But instead, I'm like, all right, what's going on for them that is true where I can really join them, but it helps them see like w- really what this is really all about. And I said, nobody wants to be the bad guy. And I'm also joining their energy too, right? I didn't try to be like, calm down, calm down. I join them. Like they're shouting, I'm shouting. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. And everybody wants to just get back to playing. So I'm going at their pace, right? I'm joining them. I'm kind of moving with them and I'm saying things that are really true for them. They're mad because they don't want to be the bad guy. They don't want to be the one who started it, right? They're saying it's his fault, it's her fault, right? And suddenly they all got quiet and then they just started playing, right? So,
Whoa.
yeah, right? Right? So a lot of times you don't need to lead someone somewhere else. You don't need to solve their problem. You just really unpack what's the reality and not my judgment on it like you're wrong or you're not being respectful. Those are my interpretations. But some things that I was pretty sure were true and people always have positive intentions. That's another thing from this world of NLP. There's always a positive intention. And so if you can identify it, that's a really good way to join someone and meet them where they are in a way they can accept it. No one wants to be the bad guy. That was true. It was just true for them. And it was clearly what was driving them both so crazy. And the third one too, but he was younger, but like none of them wanted to be the bad guy and they did all want to get back to playing. And so by connecting with that, they saw what was going on, and I didn't need to do anything. So there's less work for me. So my wife and I, like, she sees that kind of thing happening from time to time, and she would say things just like, "What just happened?" Right? And now it's not like I'm some genius or anything. I didn't invent this stuff. I'm just trying to apply these tools. And so I told her, I was like, "Well, instead of trying to change things, I just went in there and I tried to pace them," right? I had that language to pay and she knows that language now because she's read my book. And, uh, and she's like, "Whoa, okay, I'm gonna try that." And so then she's trying that, right? And then we're both doing and there are other tools too. There's many tools that help people take perspective, tools that help us react differently to our own triggers. Right? So we're not getting triggered as easily the next time the kids do something. Um, so one of those, in case there's somebody's like, wait, I need that, you can look at I think it's chapter 12, like just the facts, it's called learning how to separate the facts from your interpretations. Wonderful for reacting differently to triggers. But so my wife and I seeing this thing and we're kind of like falling in love with it. We're just like, wow, this is so cool, right? And then, like I I'm in a community where, um, I don't know why. Maybe because I'm in, Southern California, but there's a lot of dads that really like, want to be dads. We're all working all the time and we're all isolated. And so, it's all the typical pressures, but you do find at least like a lot of guys that want to be really involved. And I'm looking at my wife, she always has these like text chains and these WhatsApp groups and everything. And like the moms are talking all the time and they're supporting each other and they're helping each other out. Can you, and the dads, we're just, like, on our own, like we're like primitive cave people, like, trying to build things with a rock, by smashing it on something, we just got nothing to work with, and then I've got this incredible set of tools, and and I thought, like, the dads need to know about this, and so that's where that started, and so I've been teaching classes and, you know, trying to speak in as many of forums as I can and writing stuff to let dads know about this stuff and teach it. It's great for moms too, but being a dad, like that's I can connect and it's yeah.
So you also have taught in like last chance public high school. God love you. What did those environments teach you about like behavior and change?
Okay. That um I still think that was the best job I ever had. I know, right? It sounds a little insane. And don't get me wrong, like I went home practically in tears at, the first few months, like every teacher, and I wanted to quit and everything. Like that's standard for the job, right? I was fortunate in that I started to hit my turnaround point by my second semester. So a lot of people take their whole year before they're starting to go on the upswing, right? So and I had some good mentors, especially the assistant principal there. And I just walked into his office. I was ready to quit. I was ready to give up, and he just didn't miss a beat. He just said, I'm hearing a lot of frustration, and I know you wouldn't be frustrated if you didn't care, and it just completely reframed the whole thing for me. I was like, yes, actually, I am struggling so much because I actually care about figuring this out. How do you communicate? And it was this fascinating world of, so I've got these kids, Last Chance Public High School in New York City. So they're 17 to 21 because after 21, you age out of high school in New York. You're not allowed to be in high school. You either get a GED or that's it. Right. And they were there for all kinds of reasons. They had failed out of their other school, they had been to jail, they had kids, they had to drop out, and now they're coming back to school. Some of them were there just because it was their way of getting through the system of, they had nothing to eat. And if they could just keep failing one class, they could stay in school longer and then so there was like, that was a small percentage, but I mean, there's all
Right.
kinds of reasons. And you've got, uh, this is completely different world from me, of course, right? I have this totally different background, and um, so I was trying to figure out, like, well, how do you get people? I came in with the mistaken idea that most people have, which is that I need to somehow motivate them to want to learn. And what I learned was that everybody inherently wants to learn, like, is just fascinated by all kinds of things. And so often school gets them like they start to hate school so much and they hate being punished so much and they hate being like treated like second class citizens or being like, disrespected so much that they don't like school and they think therefore they don't like learning. And they have this aversion to it. But you have to go pretty far out of your way to get someone to get to the point where they feel like they don't like learning, even though it happens a lot. It takes a lot of work to get someone to that point. And, I discovered, well, wait a second, everyone's just inherently fascinated with so many things if you just don't get in the way. So here, we have these classes, we're doing math and like they're interested, like this kind of cool stuff. And, I would tell them, look, you're never going to use this day to day. And they would start arguing with me and tell me why they are going to use it. Right. And I was like, wow, that was interesting. And so I started learning something about like letting them do the work of convincing themselves instead of me doing it. And I started to realize I had these beliefs that were in the way about what my job was. And then I discovered when I gave like the first math test, and all of a sudden, half of them just kind of like withered and disappeared for the rest of the semester. And I was like, oh, wait a second. They were loving it, and now they're not loving it. What happened? It wasn't about the math. And that's when I realized that math in particular, but a lot of science, we don't test on what we've taught. You actually haven't taught people what you're testing on. The specific mechanics of how do I solve this problem, that wasn't the bulk of the stuff you were teaching. That's just a way to solve a problem that happens to be connected. It's like, wait a second. And so then I start realizing, like, unpacking, well, what is it that gets someone to give up? And what is it that and so I just became so interested in how people learn and what gets in the way and what's how do we communicate and how do other people's minds work? And so here I'm teaching this and I'm really falling in love with teaching. And then the relationships with the kids once you start to approach it that way are amazing and they're teaching me so much. And they're like, even the silly things of like explain this was back in the 90s, like explaining to me what Jay-Z's lyrics mean, you know.
Oh my God.
But, like, I saw things that just they suggest so much about how the mind works, like, I didn't know this. This is just secondhand this is just obvious knowledge to some people, but we might do a read aloud thing in the class, and kids who are speaking to me in accents from, like, normal New York accents, all of a sudden start reading, and they're reading in a Jamaican accent. And it's like, "Wait, those are 2 separate languages? Like, reading and speaking?" And just sort of like so I started to understand all these subtle ways that context matters so much, and the things that I've been so I started really loving this idea of being curious about other people's minds, and then this was around the same time that I started studying NLP, which is one of the core lessons, or perhaps the core lesson in NLP, is that whatever someone's doing, there is a world in which their behavior makes sense. And your job, if you really want to help them make a change, is to understand and join that world. And then it will be just the answers will become obvious. Kind of like with that example of pacing I gave you. And so here I'm learning this at the same time as I'm teaching these kids. And so I have starting to gain these tools about how to get curious about their minds and understand how they think. And so it's just a sort of wonderful confluence of things happening at the same time. I in some ways wish I could have kept teaching there forever, but I'm also glad I got to go do all these other things, and I'm thankful that they didn't pay enough because that motivated me to try to do something else, and had they paid enough, I would have still been there, and I wouldn't have written these books, and who knows? Life is interesting in these ways, but I loved that job.
So how can people move from intellectual understanding into actual new habits?
Okay. Um, so there so do you have a specific I wonder actually, do you have a specific example of mine? Because that could make it easier to talk about in a useful way for people.
Um, let's see.
If not, I can come up with one.
Mm, time management. Like they want to learn to be on time.
Okay. Right. So there's many things that can mean being on time, but one is like for me, I have been comfortable kind of like showing up just barely at the end of like pickup time to pick up the kids from school or drop them off at school, and sometimes it means we're late and the kids will get annoyed and my wife will get annoyed or the school will get annoyed, right? And I'll sometimes I'll beat myself up. Um like, why am I, why do I always do that? And so the thing is, what I can start to do then is like, sure, I know that conceptually it's easy. You leave earlier, right? Duh, right? You plan ahead. But it's not that easy because what you can start to do if you really want to make that change is explore the things that get in the way because there is a world in which the best thing I can do is to be late. And until I understand that, I'm going to keep being late. So when I unpacked it for myself, these are some of the things that happen. I've got 10 minutes until I need to go. And I know that sometimes if I push it later, I have made it. So I know I can get away with it sometimes, right? If there's no traffic. And so that's kind of there. I know that. And it's kind of exhilarating when I do. I feel great about myself when I pull it off. I managed to get the extra work in and I still got there on time. So there is something, there's a little bit of pride in it. And that also that I wasn't someone who valued being on time and just sitting around. I'm someone who wants to do things, right? So I have this value also that if I'm just gonna go and be there early and wait, who am I? Am I just someone who sits around and waits, right? So this is I've got this internal conflict. So I have a few things pushing back. And then what is it that I really want? I really don't wanna be early. I don't like being late, but man, I don't wanna be early. I only wanna be precisely on time, which is impossible. So what I'm trying to do is not possible. It's also not in my control to only be on time. So it's a goal that's a setup for failure. So here I've unpacked a lot of things that, you look at this. If you wanted to be late, aim to always be on time only, never early. Um, be someone who takes pride in being able to pull off a lot of things last minute. Um, be someone who wants to use every moment productively, right? And I can guarantee you'll be late, right? Now, so it's funny to talk about it that way, but this is one of the things that we can do. One of the founders of NLP had this phrase, "Teach me how to fail." Anything you want to change? Well, wait a second. Teach me how to fail just like you do, because there's a reason. And once we unpack it, now that I've unpacked it, now I have a lot of stuff to work with. Well, wait a second. How important is it to me, this feeling of pride that I can pull things off? I know I can pull things off. I'm amazing. What if I attach that pride to showing up early? To changing myself. Okay, that kind of works for me. Might not work for you, but it works for me, right? What about if I change the goal to something that is within my control, like not just being on time all the time, but being there at least 5 minutes early? Okay, that's great, right? And then now sometimes, so I tried that with the pickups, and I'll tell you what happened. I got there and I arrived at the same time as all the other parents, and there were no parking spaces. And I was like, "Wait a second, I think I prefer being late. I get to just park and walk right in." And you know what? I don't get in trouble for it. So I made a new agreement with myself, which is that in the context of doing school pickups, I'm I'm at peace with having my kids be a little frustrated and the school person at the school giving me a look. I am at peace with that, right? But for other things, it really does matter to me, like showing up for this podcast. I show up early because I really like the comfortable feeling I get of being here and being ready, right? And so this kind of nuance. So how do we actually take an idea and turn it into a behavior? There's a little bit of, wait, let me unpack. What would really happen if I did that? That's the key question. And you'll start to discover, if you're honest with yourself, what is in the way. Once you've
Right.
discovered that, you're a creative person, you're going to come up with a lot of new solutions as long as you're really honest about that.
Now, you often advocate treating life as a small experiments, which can blow up in your face. So, what does that look like in everyday life?
So, now that's the thing. If it feels like it can blow up in your face, then I wouldn't call it small.
Mm-mm.
And I do think that's a crucial distinction. There's a time and a place, I'm sure, for taking a big risk. I've taken some big risks in my life, right? And some people would say even getting married is a big risk, right? Although a lot of times for some people it doesn't feel that way. But the point is, when I'm saying consider things as an experiment, and this also comes from NLP, there's this belief, this kind of core belief we encourage people to take on in all contexts. There's no failure, only feedback. There is no such thing as failure, is the idea, which is a little out there. There is no such thing as failure? What do you mean? Of course we can fail. Well, suppose life isn't just about achieving goals, but you're trying things and you're getting feedback about what works, what doesn't, what you'd like to do, how that felt. That is, on some level, that's really the truth. And you could operate that way, and it's different. Now, when I say doing experiments, I think it's important to say safe experiments, and safe depends on what feels safe to you. So if I want to experiment with a new way of negotiating, I sometimes like I've had to ask people for money that's owed, right? And that's an uncomfortable thing to do, right?
Right.
And and I went and I talked to somebody who's very good at that and is comfortable with it. And then I tried to unpack, how do you do that? Something in NLP we call modeling. And that's in chapter 2. How do you do that modeling? How do you learn a skill that somebody else has? You learn about their beliefs, you learn about the things they do when they get stuck, you learn about how they frame the goal, you learn about their feelings about it, how they evaluate success. There's a lot of things you can learn. So I learned a lot, and then I'm thinking, this is scary, right? I'm going to go try to ask for money in this new way that I've never done before. But to make it a safe experiment for myself, I reminded myself the outcome was never in my control anyway. The other person has to decide to do something, has to decide to give the money, even if it's owed, right? Like, so that wasn't in my control to begin with. So it's not in my control. This new approach makes sense to me as a way to get the person to be more likely to want to give me the money. Right. So it's safe. I don't see a big downside except for the discomfort of trying something new and not knowing the future. And that's something I can tolerate. So for me, it was a big experiment emotionally, but it was safe. Like I knew that I wasn't going to end up any worse off than any other approach. So I think that's a key thing. And there's a lot smaller experiments too. Like if you want to go and your kids or your partner or someone you work with is upset, or and you kind of join them for a moment instead of trying to talk them out of it, that's generally a safe experiment. You're not saying you're right, but it's saying like, wow, that's like really distracting. Like that's a really, tough spot to be in. And like allowing that moment to be just like, I'm here with you. That's a really tough spot to be in. I'm not saying you're right. I'm not saying like, maybe I even think it's your fault, but like that is a tough spot to be in. That is true. Right. Let me join you. That's a safe experiment for most people. And so when you look at it as an experiment, it becomes much easier because you're not saying, oh, I'm going to be this person. If I want to start showing up on time, and I say, I'm going to do it from now on, well, now I've just set myself up for failure. But if I say, I'm going to discover what it's like to do that for a week, and I'm making no commitments about what I'm going to do after that week, becomes something almost anyone can do. And a lot of times people learn things by doing that they never would have expected.
Okay, my final question for you is where can people find you, your books, your programs if they want to go deeper after this episode?
Yes, two places. So the book is The Difference That Makes the Difference. And it is a simple way to learn what's in NLP, what tools there are for anyone with no background. And it's designed to make it very easy to apply, one tool per chapter. Um, and it's a great intro to NLP if you don't have any background. If you do have some background, it can be a great way to relearn it in really simple ways. And The other place is my website, Josh Davis PhD, and you'll find there's free downloads there, like one pagers with tips. These would be tips for dads, but so there's downloads there. And the on my handles on social media are all at Josh Davis PhD, so it's the same as the website, Josh Davis PhD.
Josh, thank you so much for coming on to my podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.